Hello, hello. Today we're going to talk about a few different rulers that were pharaohs during the time of ancient Egypt. So if you're on your assignment on Teams, you can see here that number 1, watch the video, which you are currently watching. And then number 2, you're going to complete the Egyptian ruler worksheet. So it's kind of a note sheet that we're going to be taking notes on as we are going through this PowerPoint right here. So I do have this PowerPoint, as you can see, number 3. This Egyptian rulers PowerPoint is here. If you'd like to follow along on that, you can kind of click back and forth between the two. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the note sheet, the worksheet, and we'll kind of walk through what we're going to be listening and looking for as we go through the PowerPoint together. So again, you pull it up and you click Edit Presentation. I always click Edit in Browser. This time I went ahead and put the text boxes in for you, but again, if you ever open up an assignment and there's not text boxes or you're not able to type, then you will just need to put the text boxes in yourself. So once we're here, I always click View, click Zoom 100%, and OK. So we're going to come up here to the top. As you can see, it's Egyptian rulers. We got this big, strong Egyptian ruler right there. And we're going to go through each box here is a blank. Now, if you're listening, following along on the PowerPoint, the words here will be bold. These words will be obvious. And then as we go through the 3 pharaohs, the words that will need to go there will be there as well. So we're listening for what the rulers were called. They were given what? And then during the Old, Middle, and New Kingdom, where were the pharaohs buried? And then down here we have the uniter, which is king someone. The game changer, who is king, well, actually queen something, and her name goes there. And she became her stepson's something, which means someone who rules for a child until the child is old enough to rule. And then finally we have our 3rd pharaoh, which is the golden son, who is king blank, or Tut for short. So as you're following along in the PowerPoint or the video, fill out this note sheet, and once it's all complete, you will click Close and you will click Turn it in. So go ahead and now you can click open your PowerPoint and follow along there, because there are a few videos and different links to different activities within the PowerPoint for you to do. So go ahead and we'll pull up the PowerPoint and we'll walk through this together. So today we're talking about Egypt's rulers. So the rulers of Egypt were called pharaohs. We've talked about that a little bit before. Pharaohs were the ones who were in charge of Egypt, and they were given what's called absolute power or complete control. The pharaohs were the one in charge of everything. They had the say. They didn't have to, get permission from anyone else. They didn't have to talk about it with anyone else. What they said goes. No questions asked. And this was because they believed that the pharaoh was a god. They believed that one of their gods came into the pharaoh, and the pharaoh was ruling and was in charge of everything. And we talked about before, they believed that the pharaoh could control whether or not there was a good harvest, whether or not the river flowed bad, all different things. So they gave the pharaohs absolute power because they believed the pharaoh was a god. Now, during the Old Kingdom, the pharaohs were buried in the pyramids. The pharaohs were buried in the pyramids. They had, if you remember, the pyramids were the big tombs that they stored. That's where they buried the pharaoh, but also stored the treasure for the pharaoh for the afterlife. One bad thing about this is it was like a huge beacon saying, hey, guess what? There's treasure buried here. So a lot of times the pyramids would be raided or robbed, which was not good because they thought that the pharaoh needed that stuff to stay in the tomb so they could have an happy afterlife, so they would not cause problems for the Egyptians. So once they figured out, we probably shouldn't build them in these huge pyramids because people are finding them and robbing them, and also it's very expensive to build. During the Middle Kingdom, they started burying them in hidden tombs, just kind of random places all over, where, that keeps them from being robbed. But then it's hard to remember, like, wait, where did we bury this person? Wait, have we buried someone here before? So it just started getting confusing. So then they started burying them in a place called the Valley of the Kings. Now this is what the Valley of the Kings looks like. It's got different mountains and cliffs and hills here, and then down in the valley, if you look closely, you can see entrances to where they have buried them in the side of the cliffs here. It keeps it hidden, but if you know what you're looking for, you can find it. So they went from huge beacons like saying, hey, here's our treasure, to hidden tombs that they have no idea where they're at, to finally figuring out, hey, let's put it in the Valley of the Kings, which in a little bit we will watch a video where people actually tour the Valley of the Kings. It's pretty neat because they get to go down here and they actually get to go inside a couple of the tombs in the Valley of the Kings. So now we're talking about our first pharaoh, the Uniter. Now we have talked about this pharaoh before. He is the pharaoh who united Upper Egypt with Lower Egypt and became ruler over all Egypt. And his name was King Menes. So he united Upper and Lower Egypt. So, and if you remember, it's backwards of what you think. Upper Egypt is down here and Lower Egypt is up here because the Nile River flows down. So this is downstream, upstream. So Upper Egypt upstream, Lower Egypt downstream. But King Menes was in charge of Upper Egypt, then took over Lower Egypt and was in charge of all Egypt. He wore a double crown, and he did this to show that he was in charge of all Egypt. So this is the crown that Upper Egypt pharaohs, kings wore. This is the crown that Lower Egypt kings wore. And then King Menes wore a double crown to show that he was over both Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. And here you can see a hieroglyph painting of King Menes wearing that double crown. Now, kind of just a fun fact, King Menes actually died tragically. He was killed by a hippo. So kind of just a funny fun fact. He died tragically from a hippo. Hippos are actually extremely dangerous animals and can run pretty fast on land for being a large animal. And they are also actually pretty fast in water and can chase you. And then they actually go under the water where you don't know where they're at. And then they kind of pop up like a crocodile does. So tragically died from a hippo. Our next pharaoh is the Game Changer. The Game Changer. Now, this king, well, actually queen, is called Hatshepsut. Hatshepsut. So she was married to Thutmose II, and he had a son. It was her stepson, and the stepson was named Thutmose III. Well, Thutmose II died, and his son was not quite old enough yet to be in charge of Egypt. So Hatshepsut, Queen Hat, I'm going to call her, became what's called a regent. So this is a picture of Queen Hatshepsut, and she became regent. So a regent is when power is given to someone else to be in charge because the chosen ruler is not old enough yet. So this is our next blank after Hatshepsut is regent. So her stepson was not old enough to rule yet, so she was chosen to be the one in charge until he was old enough. So, you know, in a few years, she was supposed to step down and he was supposed to become pharaoh. However, once she became regent, she decided she liked being pharaoh. So she said, yeah, I'm no longer regent, and now I am pharaoh. And the stepson does not get to be in charge until I die. So it's not going to be a few years thing. She was planning on it being many, 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 many years of her being pharaoh. So she declared herself pharaoh. She no longer was just a regent. She was pharaoh. She was in charge. During this time, she built many monuments for herself. She actually expanded trade for Egypt as well. Egypt did very well under her rule, but she mysteriously died. So here we can see this is her memorial tomb. So it's not where she was actually buried, but this is a memorial tomb with all of her statues and different things, just enormous. But she died mysteriously, and then her stepson became pharaoh. And then not long after she died, all of her statues, like the heads were broken off of them, any hieroglyphic paintings on walls that had her in it were scratched off the walls. It was like somebody tried to erase her from history. And so if you go to the PowerPoint and click on this link, it's going to take you to a video that talks about Hatshepsut, talks about her and kind of how she became in power and what happened to her when she died and what happened to her, the memory after she died. And finally, we are now to the Golden Sun. This is our third pharaoh that we are talking about, the Golden Sun. And his name is King Tutankhamun. A lot of times you'll hear King Tut. People shorten it to King Tut. Tutankhamun. So these pictures are of the gold face mask that was on his mummy. So during that time when they were mummifying their pharaohs, they would make a face mask to resemble the person who had died so that they believed their spirit could find the body. And this was made out of gold and had all kinds of other precious metals on it and is in display at a museum now. But he was only 9 years old when he became pharaoh. And he did okay as a pharaoh. Wasn't terrible, wasn't great, but he only reigned for 10 years because he died when he was 19. People hated his parents. His parents weren't very good rulers. They changed, and in the people's view, they weren't good rulers. They changed a lot of things, a lot of traditions, and the people didn't like that. So King Tut had a lot to prove to people because the Egyptians did not like his parents. And then again, he died mysteriously at 19 years old, and his tomb is also in the Valley of the Kings. So here you can actually see inside of his tomb. They didn't find his tomb until 1922, and everything was still intact and still in the tomb. It had not been found by grave robbers, so we were able to see, what it would have actually been like at that time. So you can see here just how elaborate his burial chamber is with the hieroglyphics and the paints, and how he had a completely gold sarcophagus. And so we were able to get a lot of information from King Tut's tomb because most things were still intact. It was filled with many, many treasures. And then if we click here, so this is actually a link where you can tour one of the tombs in the Valley of the Kings. This one is for Ramses IV. If you click on it, it takes you through like a 3D tour, and you just click through and you get to go and you get to see the walls. And you can still see the paint, the original paint on the walls, and just the detail and the carved hieroglyphics. You can go up to where the sarcophagus was. And then now this this link down here is a YouTube video of people going and touring the Valley of the Kings. They go into King Tut's tomb, they go into Ramses IX, and then Ramses IV as well. So really neat video. And then at the end, they go snorkeling in the Red Sea. And I thought it was pretty interesting because the Red Sea was a lot more, tropical, you could even say, than I pictured. I don't know why I was thinking, but in my mind, I just pictured the Red Sea to look more just kind of like a lake, but it's very like ocean-like, and there's coral reefs, and it's just very, very pretty. So check out those links. Make sure you fill out the note sheet. Click turn it in once you're done with that. And if you have any questions, send me a message on Teams, a message on Remind, or an email.